Your role doesn't align with our corporate structure, Caroline explained during a brief Zoom call. Your department is being consolidated. My name is Dustin Hale, 44 years old, Senior Development Director at Red Forge Technologies in Boulder, Colorado. For 12 years, I had built systems and led teams that transformed us from a struggling startup into a respected name in energy solutions. Every major platform we created, every innovative process, I had my fingerprints all over them. I didn't argue or display any emotion when Caroline delivered the news. I simply asked about the transition process and logged off, professional to the end. That was 3 weeks ago. Today, I sat in my home office reviewing the non-compete clause in my contract. The language had loopholes, big ones. The acquiring company's legal team had been sloppy, probably assuming that employees from a smaller firm wouldn't notice or have the resources to fight back. Their mistake. My phone buzzed with another message from Jason, our lead system architect, the fifth engineer to reach out since the acquisition announcement. You were right about the new management. They're gutting the innovation pipeline. Are you still thinking about that project we discussed? I set my phone down without responding. Not yet. Timing mattered. The acquisition had been celebrated across the industry. Triumph Energy Corporation, a Fortune 500 behemoth, absorbing our promising upstart company. The press release praised our complementary capabilities and shared vision. Caroline Vega, their newly appointed CEO for our division, had promised minimal disruption. We value the talent that built Red Forge. Empty words. The first layoffs came within 8 days. I opened my laptop and reviewed the business plan I'd been refining for months, not because I predicted being fired, though I'd had suspicions, but because I saw the trajectory of the company changing even before the acquisition. The executives were chasing quarterly numbers instead of innovation. When Triumph made their offer, our leadership team practically tripped over themselves accepting it. Their eagerness should have been the first warning sign. In the kitchen, I poured a cup of coffee and looked at the whiteboard I'd mounted on the wall. It contained the names of Red Forge's top clients, their pain points, and the solutions our team had built, solutions that would soon be dismantled by people who didn't understand them. Below the client names was a list of 5 engineers, the best minds at Red Forge, people I had personally mentored, people who were now privately asking me what came next. I hadn't answered them yet because my plan wasn't quite ready, but it would be soon. I had joined Red Forge when it was just 11 people working out of a converted warehouse. The founder, Harold Thompson, had a vision for revolutionizing commercial energy monitoring systems but lacked the technical framework to execute it. I created that framework, building our first viable product, working 80-hour weeks while my marriage slowly collapsed under the strain. "You're married to that company," my ex-wife said during our final argument. She wasn't wrong. For over a decade, I declined offers from larger competitors with better salaries and benefits. Harold made me feel valued. "This is your company too, Dustin," he would say. We didn't have formal equity agreements, a mistake I now recognize, but there was always the promise that loyalty would be rewarded when the company succeeded. Then, Harold developed health problems 3 years ago, and his son Tyler took over. Tyler had his MBA from an impressive university, but lacked his father's passion for the work. He focused on making Red Forge attractive for acquisition rather than building something lasting. The culture shifted. Quarterly metrics replaced innovation goals. When I raised concerns in executive meetings, Tyler would nod politely and change the subject. "We'll circle back to that, Dustin," became his standard response. We never did. 6 months ago, I overheard Tyler in the conference room with 2 Triumph executives discussing which teams would be redundant after the acquisition. My department was at the top of their list. That night, I began sketching what would eventually become the blueprint for Pinnacle Dynamics, a competing firm built on everything Red Forge was abandoning. I kept my plans quiet, continued performing excellently, and waited. If they decided to keep me, I would stay loyal. If not, I had an alternative ready. The first sign that my position was truly in jeopardy came when Caroline scheduled individual meetings with each department head except me. Then, I was removed from strategic planning emails. Finally, Matthew from Human Resources requested just a quick chat about my team structure. Still, I updated documentation, trained junior engineers, and made myself indispensable, or so I thought. 2 days before my termination, Caroline asked for access to my project archives and development roadmaps. I provided everything promptly and thoroughly professional to the end. When the Zoom call came, it lasted exactly 7 minutes. She didn't know that while she was explaining my transition package, I was already texting Jason. Time to talk about that project. Dinner at my place tomorrow, 7 p.m. 5 engineers showed up. They all had the same story. Marginalized by new management, innovations shelved, concerns dismissed. They were waiting for someone to build something better. The moment that truly crystallized everything was watching Caroline's first company-wide presentation 6 weeks after the acquisition, with 47 people already laid off. She stood on the stage that once showcased our technical achievements and unveiled Triumph's integration roadmap. Red Forge's systems will be phased out over 18 months as we transition to Triumph's enterprise architecture, she announced. The architecture she referred to was outdated by at least 3 years. Our team had developed solutions specifically because Triumph's approach couldn't handle the complexity modern clients demanded. Now, they were scrapping our innovations to force-fit their existing framework. In the audience, I watched the remaining engineers exchange glances. They knew what this meant. Years of work erased, client needs ignored. The very innovations that had made Red Forge valuable enough to acquire would be dismantled. I didn't speak during the Q&A, didn't challenge Caroline's assertions about synergies and economies of scale. I simply observed who nodded along with her statements and who stared at their notebooks, avoiding eye contact. After the meeting, I walked to my car in the parking garage, sat there for almost an hour, engine off, thinking. This wasn't just about me losing my job. This was about something I had helped build being deliberately dismantled by people who didn't understand its value. That evening, I opened my laptop and finalized the business plan I'd been developing. What had started as a contingency was now becoming real. I created a secure messaging group with the 5 engineers who had come to my house after my termination. If you're serious about building something better, I have a proposal. Discretion essential. All 5 responded immediately. For the next 3 weeks, we met in the evenings at my house. We identified the flaws in Triumph's approach, the opportunities they were missing, and the clients most likely to be dissatisfied by the changes. We mapped out exactly what made our Red Forge system superior and how we could evolve them further without violating intellectual property laws. I used my severance package to secure a small office space and file the necessary paperwork to establish Pinnacle Dynamics. The company name was deliberately chosen to evoke elevation, rising above what Red Forge had become. The day after receiving my final paycheck from Triumph, I received a message from Tyler Thompson. Heard you might be starting something. We should talk before you do anything hasty. I didn't respond. There was nothing to discuss. The time for conversations had passed weeks ago when Caroline decided my 12 years of contributions aligned with nothing in their corporate structure. Instead, I sent a different message to my team of 5. Office space secured. Legal documents ready. Timeline accelerated. Are you ready to resign tomorrow? 5 variations of yes came back within minutes. I closed my laptop and looked at the framed photo I kept on my desk. The original Red Forge team from 12 years ago, Harold's arm around my shoulder, both of us grinning at the first working prototype. This one's for you, Harold, I said quietly. We'll build it right this time. 3 months after launching Pinnacle Dynamics, we secured our first major client, Vestral Manufacturing, a mid-sized production facility that had been using Red Forge systems for years. Their operations director, Anthony, had worked closely with me on customizations for their specific energy management needs. Triumph's integration team doesn't understand our requirements, Anthony explained during our pitch meeting. They keep trying to fit us into their standard package. We demonstrated our new platform, built on Red Forge's core principles but with significant improvements. Anthony signed a contract the same day. 2 days later, I received a certified letter from Triumph Energy's legal department citing breach of non-compete agreement and theft of proprietary information. They demanded immediate cessation of operations and threatened litigation. I had anticipated this. Our attorney, Eleanor Winslow, reviewed the letter and confirmed what I already knew. Their non-compete is poorly constructed. They reference energy management solutions too broadly, and they have no evidence of proprietary theft because there isn't any. Still, fighting a Fortune 500 company would drain our limited resources. I decided to approach the situation directly, requesting a meeting with Caroline. She agreed, perhaps believing I would be intimidated. We met at Triumph's gleaming downtown office, the Red Forge logo now relegated to a small corner of the reception area. "You understand this can't continue," Caroline said as soon as we sat down. "Your company directly competes with technology you helped develop while employed here. The technology I developed while employed here is being phased out according to your own integration roadmap," I replied calmly. "And my non-compete specifically prohibits using Red Forge's proprietary systems, which we aren't." Pinnacle's architecture was built from the ground up. Caroline's expression tightened. "Regardless, you violated the spirit of the agreement, and you've poached our employees. Former employees who left voluntarily after the acquisition changed their roles." She leaned forward. "Dustin, let's be practical. Triumph has virtually unlimited resources for litigation. You have, 3 months of operating capital? Why put yourself through this? We could bring you back as a consultant during the transition 2-year contract. Excellent compensation." There it was, the trap. They didn't want to reinstate me. They wanted to bind me legally while they neutralized any competitive threat. "I appreciate the offer," I said, standing up, "but I'll take my chances with Pinnacle." That afternoon, Triumph escalated. They contacted Vestral Manufacturing and 2 other potential clients, warning them about potential legal issues with Pinnacle's technology. Anthony called me immediately. "They're threatening to audit our existing systems and void our maintenance agreements if we work with you," he said, frustration evident in his voice. "We can't risk that disruption right now." Within 24 hours, we lost all 3 prospects. Our runway suddenly shortened from months to weeks. The team gathered in our small office that evening, faces tense. They looked to me for direction. "They're playing hardball," I acknowledged. "But they've made a strategic error." I pulled up an email I'd received that morning from Harold Thompson, Red Forge's original founder. He'd been silently watching the acquisition unfold from retirement. "Dustin, I've been following what's happening. Triumph didn't just acquire Red Forge's technology, they acquired its problems too. Call me. I think we can help each other." I looked at my team. Triumph is so focused on crushing us that they're neglecting their integration. We know the weaknesses in Red Forge's original architecture better than anyone. Harold says they're already experiencing system failures with key clients. Jason nodded slowly, understanding dawning on his face. "And those clients will need solutions fast. Solutions Triumph can't deliver in time." "Exactly," I said. "They're trying to bury us in legal threats while their technical foundation crumbles. We don't need to fight them directly. We just need to be ready when their clients start looking for alternatives." The meeting with Harold changed everything. We met at his lake house outside Boulder, away from corporate eyes. At 72, he moved more slowly than when we worked together, but his mind remained sharp. "They didn't just buy Red Forge for the technology," Harold explained, spreading documents across his dining table. "They bought it for the client contracts, specifically the Meridian Energy Group account. Meridian was our largest client, a regional utility provider serving 3 states. Their contract alone represented 30% of Red Forge's annual revenue. What Triumph doesn't understand is that Meridian's infrastructure requirements are unique, Harold continued. Their grid management system was customized extensively. You led that project, Dustin. I nodded. 4 years of development nearly burned out my entire team getting it right. Harold slid a confidential memo across the table. Internal Triumph communications forwarded by a board member who remained loyal to him. They're promising Meridian seamless integration while planning to force them onto standard Triumph architecture. The timeline is impossible. The memo outlined a 6-month migration schedule for a system that had taken us 4 years to build. Even worse, it dismissed specific requirements as unnecessary customizations that would be standardized. Meridian doesn't know yet, Harold said quietly. But when they begin implementation and the limitations become clear. I finished his thought. Meridian will face service disruptions, possibly regulatory issues, if they can't maintain required reporting. Exactly. And here's what Triumph doesn't realize. The contract I negotiated with Meridian includes performance guarantees, significant penalties for systems that don't maintain 99% uptime. This was the piece I hadn't known. Triumph hadn't just acquired our company. They'd inherited obligations they couldn't fulfill. No wonder they were so aggressive about shutting down Pinnacle. They feared we might approach Meridian before their integration failures became evident. But there was something else in Harold's expression, a personal edge to his involvement. "Why are you helping us?" I asked directly. "Triumph paid you well for the acquisition." Harold's gaze hardened. "They did. Then they used clauses in the agreement to devalue the final payment based on integration costs." Tyler didn't understand what he was signing. The deal that made headlines? We received about 60% of that figure, and my son's stake was wiped out entirely. There it was. Triumph had manipulated the acquisition to pay less than promised, using complex financial mechanisms that Tyler hadn't detected. They hadn't just discarded the Red Forge team. They'd cheated the founders too. "Does Tyler know you're talking to me?" I asked. Harold shook his head. Tyler took a position with Triumph's corporate development team. He believes he's being groomed for executive leadership. His voice carried the weight of fatherly disappointment. "He'll learn eventually." As I drove back to Denver, a new understanding crystallized. This wasn't just about my termination or Triumph's poor business decisions. This was about systematic corporate predation, identifying smaller companies with valuable client relationships, acquiring them under false pretenses, extracting what they wanted, and discarding the rest. The engineers they fired? Calculated losses. The promises they broke? Negotiating tactics. The technologies they dismantled? Inconvenient complications. I pulled into my driveway and sat in silence for several minutes, processing the implications. Then I called Jason. "Contact the team. Meeting at the office tomorrow, 7 a.m. We need to accelerate development of our Meridian-compatible system, and I need you to pull every piece of documentation we have on their grid architecture." "Are we going after Meridian?" Jason asked, his voice a mix of excitement and apprehension. "Not yet," I replied. "But we're going to be ready when they start looking for help. And they will, sooner than Triumph expects." We had 8 weeks to prepare for Meridian's inevitable crisis. The team worked around the clock, developing a platform that could seamlessly interface with Meridian's existing infrastructure while providing the improvements they would soon desperately need. I maintained a careful distance from Meridian executives, knowing Triumph was likely monitoring any contacts. Instead, I focused on building our capacity and evidence base. We documented every public failure in Triumph's integration process, creating a comprehensive analysis of where their approach was fundamentally flawed. Meanwhile, Harold activated his industry network. Without directly referencing our strategy, he began raising questions at energy sector conferences about the technical challenges of forced system migrations. The conversation was happening exactly where we needed it, in the professional circles where Meridian's technical leaders participated. The first major crack appeared 5 weeks into our preparation. Triumph initiated the first phase of Meridian system migration and immediately encountered the issues we had anticipated. 3 substations experienced monitoring failures, creating gaps in regulatory compliance data. Meridian's Chief Technology Officer, Vanessa Powell, publicly described the issues as expected transition challenges, but privately. According to Harold's contacts, she was furious. 2 weeks later, when the second phase caused a 4-hour reporting blackout across an entire service region, the situation escalated. Meridian issued a formal notice of deficiency to Triumph, triggering the performance guarantee clauses. Triumph's response was telling. They assigned blame to inherited architectural limitations from Red Forge. They were setting up a narrative to void the performance guarantees by claiming the original system was defective. That was the opening we needed. I drafted a detailed technical analysis demonstrating how the failures stemmed not from Red Forge's original architecture, but from Triumph's incompatible integration approach. Harold delivered this document personally to Vanessa Powell. 3 days later, I received a text message from an unknown number. Coffee tomorrow, 2 p.m., Westside Roasters. It was signed simply VP. When I arrived at the cafe, Vanessa was already seated in a corner booth. She got straight to the point. "Your analysis matches our internal findings," she said quietly. "Triumph is attempting to force us into their system to avoid maintaining our customizations. The regulatory risks are unacceptable." "You have options," I replied carefully. "Do I?" "Our contract with Triumph is binding. Breaking it would trigger penalties that would exceed our annual technology budget. Unless Triumph is a material breach through performance failures," I suggested, "which your legal team is likely exploring right now." Vanessa's slight smile confirmed my assumption. We would still need an immediate alternative. Regulatory reporting can't wait for a new vendor selection process. I slid a flash drive across the table. This contains a technical overview of Pinnacle's platform. It was built specifically to address the issues you're experiencing. We can deploy within 3 weeks with 0 regulatory interruption. She pocketed the drive without examining it. "Triumph claims you violated non-compete agreements." "They've made that claim, yes, but their legal position has significant weaknesses, which our counsel has documented." I provided a second flash drive. "This contains our attorney's analysis. Your legal team will find it illuminating." Vanessa nodded once. "I'll be in touch." 2 days later, Triumph announced an emergency stabilization of Meridian systems, effectively admitting their integration approach had failed. Their stock dropped 8% by market close. That evening, I received an official request for proposal from Meridian Energy Group, bypassing their normal procurement process under emergency provisions. I gathered our team. "This is it. Meridian needs a solution immediately, and we've built exactly what they require. Everything we've worked for comes down to this proposal." Jason looked around the room at our small but determined team. "Should we be concerned about Triumph's response when they realize what's happening?" I shook my head. "They've created their own crisis. Now they'll have to watch us solve it." The Meridian board meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m. on a Thursday. By 10:45, my phone rang. "Unanimous approval," Vanessa said without preamble. "Expedited contract execution. We need implementation to begin Monday." Within the hour, our attorney confirmed the contract was clean. No hidden clauses or traps. Meridian had agreed to our full implementation fee plus a 3-year maintenance agreement. The numbers were substantial enough to secure Pinnacle's future for years. More importantly, the contract included a specific indemnification against Triumph's potential legal claims. Meridian's attorneys had reviewed our position and confirmed what we already knew. Triumph's non-compete claims couldn't stand up to serious scrutiny. The news hit the industry by mid-afternoon. Triumph's stock dropped another 12%. Their legal team immediately filed for an emergency injunction to block our contract. The hearing was scheduled for Monday morning, the same day our implementation was set to begin. When we arrived at the courthouse, Triumph had 4 attorneys present, led by their chief counsel. Caroline sat behind them, her expression tight with controlled anger. The judge reviewed the filings efficiently, then looked directly at Triumph's team. Your non-compete agreements appeared to prohibit using proprietary Red Forge systems, but evidence suggests Pinnacle developed independent architecture. Furthermore, Meridian's filing demonstrates urgent public interest in maintaining utility service reliability. She denied the injunction without further deliberation. As we exited the courtroom, Caroline intercepted me in the hallway. "This isn't over," she said quietly. "Triumph doesn't lose." I met her gaze steadily. This was never about winning or losing. It was about building something that actually works. I walked past her to where my team waited. Together, we left to begin the implementation that would secure both Meridian systems and Pinnacle's future. The quiet victory felt complete. 18 months after the Meridian contract, Pinnacle Dynamics had grown to 27 employees. We occupied the entire floor of a building in downtown Boulder, with views of the mountains that had witnessed both my professional collapse and resurrection. The Meridian implementation had been flawless, completed ahead of schedule with 0 service interruptions. Word spread through the industry. 4 more major clients migrated to our platform within a year. Triumph eventually abandoned their legal pursuit, focusing instead on containing the damage to their energy division. Caroline Vega was reassigned to a subsidiary in another state. Tyler Thompson departed for a startup incubator, wiser for the experience. Harold occasionally stopped by our offices, pride evident as he watched a vision reborn. He never officially joined Pinnacle, but his guidance remained invaluable. On the 2nd anniversary of my termination, I received an unexpected email from my former boss at Red Forge, the person who had hired me 12 years earlier. "You built something better than we ever could have," he wrote. Several of us saw it coming but couldn't prevent the acquisition. Some victories take time. I closed my laptop and walked to the conference room where our team was celebrating the completion of a new module. These were no longer just colleagues. They were partners who had taken the same risk I had, believing that competence and integrity would eventually outperform corporate politics. Later that evening, I stood alone on my deck at home, watching the sunset paint the mountains. The bitter taste of betrayal had faded, replaced by something unexpected: gratitude. Without Triumph's arrogance, without Caroline's dismissal, Pinnacle might never have existed. I hadn't just reclaimed my career. I'd built something more aligned with my values than Red Forge could have become under Triumph's direction. Sometimes, getting pushed out of the wrong place is exactly what you need to find the right one.